Nigeria, like many African countries, is having her fair share of challenges, from rising geopolitical tensions to rising cost of energy, food inflation, and the foreign exchange market. Now, these have combined to become a whole lot on the table of policymakers. For starters, their concern is on how to raise revenues and plug leakages. The organized private sector is welcoming the idea of a central collection process for revenues. But where is the place of the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector in the whole scheme of things, and where do they fit in the short run? Well, breakfast is served, and of course, part of the menu is our education segment, bringing you closer to some of those terminologies you get to hear in news and reading briefs about the economy. And also, we're taking you on a trip to markets across the country to prepare you for shopping ahead of the weekend. My name is Leah, welcoming you to the very first episode of The Policy. And so before we go into the business of the day, let's bring you up to speed with major happenings around the economy in the course of the week.
The Federal Executive Council held its inaugural meeting this Monday with President Bola Tinubu, urging the 45 ministers to do their best towards turning around for better the nation's ailing economy. The President directed the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs to immediately stop the processing of visas for all government officials scheduled to travel to New York for the United Nations General Assembly UNGA without proof of direct participation in the official schedule of activities of the global event. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of Economy Ladan, who presented the roadmap for the economy during the Federal Executive Council meeting, noted that the Council agreed that the economy was not where it ought to be. He said the Council examined 8 priority areas and identified targets to deliver in the next 3 years, adding that the President has directed the ministers to roll out policy and program to turn the economy around. The National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) said that most employed Nigerians work less than 40 hours a week. This was part of the findings made by the Bureau as it rebased its computation of unemployment data to meet International Labour Organization guidelines. In its report titled Nigerian Labour Force Statistics Report, 4th quarter 2022 and 1st quarter 2023, the agency observed that at about 1/3 in the 4th quarter of 2022 and the 1st quarter of 2023 of employed persons work less than 40 hours per week in both quarters. The agency explained that most of these people are uneducated, comprising women and young people mostly, who are doing menial jobs, and those living in rural areas or villages. The House of Representatives said it would prioritize the amendment of the Act establishing the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative (NAITI) to make the agency function optimally and give it powers to prosecute offenders in the petroleum industry. Chairman House Committee on Petroleum Resources Downstream Ikegwonu Ugochinyere stated this during a walking visit to the NAITI headquarters in Abuja.
The African Continental Free Trade has remained a major issue on the front burner on the continent. And of course, Kenya recently gave us a blockbuster announcing it is going to grant free entry to Africans into their country. Yes, you heard me right. You can enter Kenya subsequently without any visa. And this is one of the most interesting twists to the free trade area agreement. Kenya has taken that bold step. But where is Nigeria in the mix of things, and where are our businesses headed? To have an understanding of how the AfCFTA is affecting you and I, and how it is going to affect you, I had this conversation with Professor Muhammed Tawfiq Ladan. He is the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, NIALS, right here in Abuja. Take a listen. The dream for Africa to trade with Africa has come alive. Of course, it has come of age and expectations are still high, although there are still concerns over barriers to trade within the continent by member nations. Professor Muhammed Tawfiq is the Director General of the National Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, and together we shall be exploring the profitability of the AfCFTA for economic growth. Thank you, Professor Ladan, for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you very much, Leah, for having me. I'm grateful.
Okay. Perhaps I would start by asking you, or rather tapping into your background of economic integration law, policy, and practice. It may seem Nigeria came a bit late to the dining table when we're talking the AfCFTA. So where is our position as a country? Are we on the table or we're still standing in the doorway?
Thank you very much for this valid question. I think this has always been a frequently asked questions by Nigerians and also by a number of actually Africans. And I think the starting point to locate where Nigeria is to understand actually the fact that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, short term actually after itself, started in Abuja in 1991 under the Abuja Treaty on the establishment of the African Economic Community as the ultimate goal, of Africa. So because the Treaty of 1991 called the Abuja Treaty itself has 6 phases, which must be achieved according to the founders and dreamers of the Africa for this African Economic Community as the ultimate goal, they actually make sure that the 6 phases, are achievable in a lifespan of about 48 to 50 years. So Nigeria is still at the forefront. Nigeria is in it because Nigeria has signed the African, the AfTA agreement itself, which is essentially on trade in goods, trade in services. It has a mechanism for dispute actually settlement mechanism. And then the scope of the AfTA agreement itself, is beyond even free trade area today. As at February 20th, 2023 today, the AU summit in Addis Ababa, adopted 3 additional protocols as under phase 2 to make it 6 protocols. So the 6 protocols have essentially defined the scope as at 2023, which actually is part of Nigeria's effort to drive the process at the continental level and then to come back home to put implementation measures actually on ground. So the fact that Nigeria was instrumental in the 1991 treaty that defined the phases of the African community in 6 phases in Abuja in 1991, the fact that it was also actually a signatory and today is a state party to the AfTA agreement, and it has put in place, as at today, a national implementation action committee to implement AfTA in Nigeria since 2019, November to be precise. And we have a Secretary General, Shegun Olo, that is responsible actually for that, with a secretariat team and some consultants. And then you have the private sector, the CSO, the academia, and then all the MDAs, are represented in different subcommittees to ensure that Nigeria actively, maximizes actually the benefits, derivable from AfTA agreement. So to answer in summary your first question, the truth of the matter actually is that Nigeria actually has been instrumental to the new business actually continental trade agreement under AfTA, and it is also capitalizing on the need actually for both the country and its citizens, particularly the private actually sector, and the CSOs benefit actually from the agreement and its 6 protocols.
Okay, but then I would want to get your position on Nigeria's trade policy. When we try to understand how most of these things work, trade is at the heart of AfTA. What is your take on the Nigerian trade policy as a whole?
Frankly speaking, we've been having some missteps, in terms of government policy inconsistencies, poor policy implementation, not only in the trade regime, but in practically almost every sector of the Nigerian economy for decades. And this has really affected, our economy. It has also affected, investors, in terms of confidence in our system, in our economy. And it has also, essentially moved even domestic investors away from, having investment, in the system. So it is gratifying actually to note that at least as at today, we have a new national trade policy, which actually was reviewed last year, and then it was adopted and approved by Federal Executive Council in Abuja, in April this year. So we have a new trade policy that clearly sets out our vision and mission, that also, respects our multilateral trade, agreement, obligations under World Trade Organization, WTO, under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AfCFTA, and then even under the ECOWAS, ETLS, which is the trade, agreement component under the ECOWAS regime. Because Nigeria actually is hosting all the three critical organs of ECOWAS in Abuja. So we have no other choice but to make sure that our trade policy, reflects the vision and mission that will enable us to be the key role player in our regional, trade, regime, in our continental trade regime, and also, in our our global trade regime. Three striking features of the policy that it sets out some guiding principles. It also puts Nigeria to trigger the policy, to discharge its treaty obligations under these three levels, in addition to the bilateral treaty agreements between, other nations. And I think it also accommodated a new trend, which is part of the trade dynamics, and that is e-commerce. The fact that it has delineated roles and responsibilities for various actors in the public and private sectors, to have a role to play, shows that we are making progress in our policy content that carries all relevant stakeholders along. For me, it is very, very important that the policy, should now have, what is missing, and that is implementation plan of action, which must clearly be activity-based. It must have timelines. It must also have some verifiable indicators against each activity. Okay, and then we must also have delineated roles and responsibilities. Who is doing what? At what point in time? What are the indicators we've set out for that particular MDA or private sector or CSO or any other entity, including even the media?
Of course, just recently we heard the chairman of the tax reform policy committee put together by the president, Mr. Tawfiq, make a case for MDAs, over 60 of them that have left their primary mandate of various descriptions to rather pursue a revenue. And for this purpose of this discussion, I'm particularly interested in the Nigerian Customs Service, which was designed in the first instance to facilitate trade, but clearly they've lost that mandate. If we're going to look at the sharp divide that they will be stepping into now, do you see this turning around the fortunes of Nigeria in terms of regional and continental trade?
I think with regards to custom, we need to put things in a context. All over the world, and even by the World Customs Union code and other instruments relevant for their operation, it is very, very clear that customs service anywhere in the world is primarily not supposed to be a revenue generation entity. It is not. custom is supposed to facilitate trade. And through actually that effort, it can actually provide mechanisms, regulatory mechanisms and guidelines and codes, that will promote, for instance, certification of the rules of origin of goods, from where to where, and who is the and how do you get it actually better, either import or export. It is also the responsibility actually of a customs service anywhere in the world, to ensure that they have a sense of legal certainty, in their own regulatory instruments, not the scattered pieces of instruments, and regulations that we had before April 2023 this year, when the customs service actually legal instruments was reformed. So as at today, it is true that in the last 2-3 months, we've had a new customs service, reform act, let me put it that way, which took into consideration the need to address, outdated, scattered pieces, of unhealthy, custom instruments that hinder trade, that push even customs service itself, instead of doing custom administration, trade facilitation, determining rules of origin of goods, and then even promoting, electronic filing of actually papers to ease doing of business, in Nigeria, by all investors, and all actually businesses, whether within Nigeria or outside Nigeria or cross-border. And instead of also, making sure that the legal instrument assists custom, to have the capacity to promote cross-border trade with ease. The scattered pieces of instrument before April 2023, essentially hindered trade and also did not really actually assist custom to promote trade facilitation. So the truth of the matter actually is that custom had to pursue a lot of things. Do custom administration, try to actually facilitate trade, try to custom police, borders, and at the same time trying to be a revenue generating entity. Because in the last 40 years or so, customs was actually seen more as a revenue generating entity, than a trade facilitator.
What is the way forward for Nigeria to actively participate in the continental trade when foreign exchange has continued to remain a great source of concern for people doing businesses and entrepreneurs on the continent?
I think we should put it also in a context. Nigeria is not an island actually to itself, and the reason being that there is actually a global economic crisis. Almost all countries, including developed economies, are devising strategies, from the shock of actually post-COVID era, and also trying to contend with the implication or effect of the Ukrainian war. And then for us in Africa, we were already actually having our own major crisis, in terms of triple shocks. First, contending with the post-COVID shock. Two, our own insecurity challenges. And then three, most African countries are in debt trap. So there must be actually some radical economic measures, that need to be actually put in place, to address these triple shocks. And I think, we know that in Nigeria, for instance, we've had some misuses and abuses again of our foreign exchange. We've not actually really put, our, some economic entities like the oil and gas, sector, for instance, at the peak of actually making more money, meaning actually getting more dollars into the economy, from the sale of actually crude oil and gas, we were actually not at the forefront in maximizing this opportunity. And I think the starting point is for us to understand that there must be some drastic measures, that seek to actually say, okay, fine, this is how we are going to address our forest scarcity. And this is actually the level of commitment that all stakeholders need to commit to. What is actually more important actually is for us to understand why, it is important not to support the rent-seeking actually entity or groups. You know, you can't actually be having an economy where the exchange rate, you know, and the differentials between the official market and the black market rate, you know, is almost, you know, 300 to 400%.
I must sincerely thank you, Professor Ladan, for making our time to join this conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for having me.
Welcome back. To get a complete dose of that interview, which I must tell you was quite enriching, incisive, and in-depth, you can log on to our YouTube page. But we're going to move ahead. You may have come across those words. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know how they apply to you. This is why we are bringing to you this very important segment, and we call it Simplify This, and we're going to simplify it for you. And from there, we take you to markets around the country to prepare you for shopping ahead of the weekend. For more on rates in markets around you, you can log into our sister website, www.marketnigertv.com, and there I tell you you're going to have all the rates available to us, and we're going to keep updating them for you to make your shopping experience easy for you in the country. We birth here for this week, and we return next week. Don't forget, you can join us on our various social media platforms, and then we continue the conversation there. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your shopping experience, and God bless Nigeria.